Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the show. It's Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. Make it legendary. We still have some time left before the Super Bowl, so we'll talk about some bounce-back candidates. Won't do much game previewing this week. That'll be for next week. But bounce-back candidates and coaching news, offensive coordinators, maybe some head coaching momentum, stuff like that. Actually, we did get a head coaching hire. We got Joe Brady being promoted to the Bills head coach. And what does that mean for Brian Dable? Will he end up in Tennessee or Las Vegas? Adam, Jamie, and Heath here. We'll go through your news and notes, and then we'll get to some bounce-back candidates, including a couple of quarterbacks who were top 5 in ADP last year and kind of stunk for your fantasy teams. Sorry about that. Good morning, Jamie.
Why are you apologizing?
I just feel bad for the people who drafted Lamar Jackson and Jayden Daniels.
Okay, that's fair. You're empathizing, not apologizing.
Empathizing, right, exactly. Is there a better word to express empathy than I'm sorry? I feel for you?
I feel for you.
Okay, we'll do that.
Yeah, I'm sorry does imply you were in some way responsible.
Right, like because the jobs that we have, like the way it comes across is like I made you draft that guy.
Well, you did.
I thought, is Brian Dable not for sure with the Titans?
No, he's still up for the
I think it's like the Mike McDaniel thing. Like he's agreed to be the Titans offense coordinator unless he gets the head coaching job.
For the Raiders.
Okay.
Which I think he's had at least 2 interviews for. So
one of my favorite moments on FFT Dynasty happened this week. I had Jeff Bell from Football Guys on, and we were talking about playoff risers and fallers. He is a Bills fan. And we had somebody in the chat that broke the news of Joe Brady getting promoted to be the head coach for the Bills. So I got to break that news to him and get his instant reaction. And it was similar to what I've seen from other Bills fans.
Which is what?
Oh.
I don't really, I get the sentiment both sides of it, right? Because it seems like kind of a little boring, I guess, but they're scoring a lot of points with him. I mean, they have a great offense. Seems like it's a lot of Josh Allen, but I mean, the result, let me see here.
I think the problem from Bills fans' perspective, it's like, okay, so you guys think everything we're doing is working except for Sean McDermott. Like that was the problem.
It seems it's very similar to, I think, with Harbaugh and Tomlin, that they feel like they've reached a point where they can't get to the next level with the same guy in charge. I don't think it's necessarily fair to McDermott. Not that I think it's a problem that was a problem for Tomlin or Harbaugh per se. But I think in the case of McDermott, like you get the interception doesn't get called that way. The penalties don't get called that way. If they win that game, they're potentially in the Super Bowl if things work out well for them. He's obviously not getting fired, even if they lose the Super Bowl. So those series of events lead to him getting fired, as opposed to if they win that game and maybe win the next game. Here we are. He's still the coach. So I don't know how much of this was Josh Allen wanting a change, because the first person they interviewed was Brian Dable, who was his former offensive coordinator. They ended up hiring his current offensive coordinator, who he seemingly has a good relationship with. I think the biggest thing for Josh Allen and the Bills is how much of the offense that we saw, which I don't think was necessarily great. I think you're right, Adam. A lot of it was just Josh Allen being great. How much of the offense will change because of what Brady was doing to adhere to what Sean McDermott wanted? Because a lot of it was somewhat conservative. Now, granted, personnel, I think, factors into that. They don't have exactly the greatest receiving core, as we're well aware. All of the sentiments, I don't know if we touched on it here, but all the sentiments about Keon Coleman, for example, after the firing were pretty awful.
We didn't touch upon it. We should, Jamie. So let's give a little summary. Give a little summary of what's gone on there with Keon Coleman, who was, their top pick a couple of years ago, and it hasn't worked out. And then there's, I guess, no one seems to agree on whose pick it was.
So being their general manager was kind of answering a question in regards to Keon Coleman, and the owner, Terry Paluga, jumped in and basically said that it was the coaching staff's recommendation to draft him, and they didn't want to draft him. He was, I don't know, the whole thing was just awful.
Right. But then there's all this video of Brandon Beane being so excited to draft Keon Coleman. It really seems like it was Brandon Beane's pick.
Yeah, and again, like if you're blaming the coaching staff and then hiring from within, especially the offensive coordinator who had to have some say in this, it just doesn't all come together. So I hope that, for Keon Coleman's sake, either A, he gets a fresh start and maybe they trade him, or B, he gets an opportunity with a new head coach to get some, clearly playing time, but opportunities to perform at a high level. They need to add receivers. We know that. Adams already attached AJ Brown to the Bills. It makes a lot of sense. I think Alec Pierce, who's to me one of the top free agents. I don't know the entire class, but George Pickens clearly, but I don't think he's getting free. But you get the point. Like one of the top free agents, hopefully ends up there. Like just need to give more weapons. But I'm always curious when things like this happen, especially when you have a defensive-minded head coach. Does the new coach, new coordinator, former coordinator, get to sort of open things up and be a little bit more aggressive? And if that's the case, and we're not seeing run bubble screen or run bubble screen, go make a play, Josh Allen, as Pete Prisco likes to say, then I hope there's an opportunity here for this offense to be a little bit more fluid and maybe give Josh Allen some more chances to throw the ball downfield and develop some weapons.
Also, I think like some of the pushback the Bills leadership is getting is that's terrible. If Keon Coleman was no longer on the team,
yeah,
that's just terrible leadership to talk about a 22 or 23-year-old guy that's still on your team that way. That's awful.
Yeah, it is. I mean, look, he's obviously had a rough tenure so far, but I felt bad for him the way they were publicly just basically calling him a terrible draft pick without saying the words. One thing to know, so a couple things to know. Joe Brady, offensive coordinator, now promoted to head coach of the Bills. They've been in his 2 years as offensive coordinator. It's been 2.5, but the last 2 seasons where he's been the offensive coordinator, they've been third in points per game. Oh, I'm sorry. I guess I don't have what they were last year, or 2024. 2025, they were third in points per game, but they've been a very slow-paced team. 26th in pace in 2025, 28th in pace the year before that, 28th and 31st in pass rate. So they haven't been throwing the ball much. But then you also look at their personnel. They haven't really been designed to do that. They've whiffed at wide receiver, basically. So will they play a little bit faster? Will they have to address wide receiver? I mean, they absolutely have to. It's a good rookie class, so they could do it through the draft. Obviously, AJ Brown is going to get traded there. I guarantee it. But if that doesn't somehow happen, they've got to figure out a way to address that. A few other news items here. So Drake May has maybe a little shoulder injury. They're being a little coy about it right now, but hopefully he can be 100% healthy for the game. Bill Belichick will reportedly not be a first ballot Hall of Famer. That's kind of big news right now. I don't know. Anybody want to share any hot takes, or should we move on?
Well, I think you should.
I think it's good. He's cheated.
That's exactly what I was expecting. You don't think Barry Bonds should be in the Hall of Fame, so you certainly should agree with this move.
Yeah, I kind of do. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, let's see what I got. The Titans. So it looks like, right, we said Brian Daboll will be their offensive coordinator unless he gets the Raiders head coaching job. And I guess we can talk about it when it becomes official. But Heath, would you like that?
I think it's probably better than what Cam Ward dealt with last year. Now, it's the old X's and O's and Jimmy's and Joe's thing. Like, they got to go. You talk about the Bills needing some guys. They got to go get some guys. It won't matter if they don't. But yeah, I think I'm slightly optimistic about it.
Yeah, I read an article, I believe on ESPN, talking about Daboll, a lot of RPOs with the Giants, and that was something that Cam Ward did a lot of at Miami. It was very successful for him. So we might see that.
I mean, Ward looked good down the stretch, and again, clearly one of the most underhyped number 1 overall picks we've ever had. Just not discussed after the draft, not discussed a lot during the season, not in consideration for Rookie of the Year. There's just a lot of things that he just kind of went under the radar, including, again, the way that he finished. I think it was, I don't remember week 18, but I believe going into week 17, he had like 3 or 4 games in a row with 2 touchdowns, 2 passing touchdowns. So he finished the season playing well. He obviously did not have Calvin Ridley for the second half of the year. The rookie receivers that he had weren't exactly the most talented duo going into the draft. His tight end started to play well down the stretch. I think that's a position of strength. Even if Chigokonkwo leaves, I think Gunnar Helm's got a chance to be a nice player. So there's pieces here. There just needs to be, I think, an alpha at the top of the receiving core and probably figure out what the run game's going to look like.
Cam Ward threw 7 touchdowns in his first 12 games, and then he threw 8 touchdowns in his last 4 games, not including
2 each in his last 4.
Yeah, not including week 18, where he actually did run for a touchdown on his only possession. Scored 9.2 fantasy.
Oh, right, he got hurt. That's right. Yep.
And he hurt his shoulder and missed the rest of the game.
And for those of you that are so concerned, he would have been the Pro Bowl quarterback instead of Shedeur Sanders if he was healthy.
Is that right?
Yes.
Cam Ward also had a stretch of 6 straight games with an interception from weeks 3 through 8. And then he only threw one more rest of season. And he only ended up with 7 picks for the year. All right. We've got Jamie. What do you think about Atlanta and what we can expect from their offense with Tommy Reese calling plays and not Kevin Stefanski?
I mean, look, Stefanski, it's so hard to sort of, I think, for a lot of people to wrap their heads around him as the coach for the Browns, because when he first got there, when he had Baker, he obviously had success, whether that was because of Baker, whether because of him. Clearly, it's, as we're seeing with the stupid Belichick not making the Hall of Fame, people saying, well, now Brady is the reason why they were so successful. They clearly went hand in hand. Stefanski's a good coach. I think he's a good offensive coach. I think he showed in his time in Minnesota as a play caller or, being part of the offensive staff there. I don't remember exactly if he called plays. I think he did, but he can run an offense, so Tommy Reese running the offense, I think doesn't necessarily mean anything about Stefanski. I think he's going to do great things in Atlanta if they figure out the quarterback, and there's just unbelievable talent there that can get better. It was good. We've seen some good seasons from Drake London. We saw finally a great season from Bijan Robinson. We saw great seasons from Kyle Pitts last year. We saw a great season from Pitts as a rookie year. So I hope, and we've talked about this, if Pitts does not stay, that they find an Isaiah Likely type of player, a free agent that's out there, or draft somebody that's going to be a good player, because tight end production for Kevin Stefanski's tenure in Cleveland, you want to call it Tommy Reese's, reason why. But I mean, David Njoku had some really solid seasons. We used to joke, I forget who was it, Harrison Bryant, the combination of Njoku and Bryant was always very successful in the beginning part of that. And then what we saw last year from Harold Fannin. So I think the tight end production will be awesome. If the right player's there, again, the right quarterback. So I think it's a good hire. I actually like Stefanski in Atlanta.
I don't remember a big shift last year when Reese took over the play calling from Kevin Stefanski, which I think was after it was basically right at the midway point in the season. I would expect it to look like a Kevin Stefanski offense, and maybe I'm hoping, like Jamie said, for Pitts or Likely, but maybe they just run a year of David Njoku. He's a free agent.
Okay. Maybe they trade for Fannin.
Yeah, I can't imagine why Cleveland would trade their best player, offensive player. Sorry, I won't go quite as far as him being better than Myles Garrett.
We had talked. Yeah, that's probably jumping the gun. We had talked about Mike McDaniel maybe not ending up with the Chargers and getting a head coaching job. It's official, right? I mean, he is the Chargers offensive coordinator, right?
I believe the press conference yesterday solidified it, and you can skip ahead to that's why a couple of Chargers are on my bounce back list.
Right, exactly. And the Jets fired their offensive coordinator, Tanner Engstrand, who came over from Detroit with Aaron Glenn. The Broncos fired.
You heard who the potential replacement is, right?
I saw Frank Reich's name.
Yeah.
Denver fired offensive coordinator Joe Lombardi, who wasn't calling plays, but a guy who's been with Sean Payton for a long time. And Payton also said that after, when they did the surgery on Bo Nix and they explored the ankle, apparently he had a pre-existing ankle condition that made a fracture inevitable. And it happened really at such a bad time. But Payton also said he has no concerns about Bo Nix's ankle going forward. T. Higgins said that Chase Brown got better each and every single week. And, we always kind of love Chase Brown's opportunity. If he really is getting better as a rusher, then, look out. He averaged 4.4 yards per carry for the season, 5.1 yards per carry in his last 12 games. And finally, Michael DeRocco of ESPN thinks that the early indications are that Travis Hunter will primarily play cornerback. Boy, he could end up being one of the worst dynasty picks.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah, what a shame. All right, we got a mailbag on Friday. So get excited for that. Get your questions in. Haven't seen a lot of questions. So if you have any questions, and it doesn't have to be a football question, it's an off-season mailbag, me, Jamie, and Dan on Friday. I think 10 a.m. Eastern. I think we're locked into that time right now. But please send your questions to fantasyfootball@cbsi.com. That's the letter I, fantasyfootball@cbsi.com. We'll be right back with our bounce back candidates after this.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
All right, bounce back candidates. Heath has Lamar Jackson, Justin Jefferson, and Terry McLaurin. Oh, Lamar Jackson, what a tremendous start to the season for him. 33 or more fantasy points in each of his first 3 games. Went downhill from there. Heath, what does Lamar Jackson bounce back to? And does the lack of an offensive coordinator right now, do you think anything could change based on who they hire?
I mean, something could change based on who they hire, but I think just in a vacuum, we saw Lamar. This is the Lamar Jackson experience. It's kind of been this way throughout his career. There are stretches where he's the best quarterback in fantasy football. There are stretches where he leaves games early and it crushes his fantasy average. What we saw that was new this year is he came back, I think, and tried to play through some stuff, and the rushing just kind of fell off of a cliff, especially when he came back towards the end of the season. His last 3 games, he had a total of 8 rush attempts, and for the season, his rush attempts were down about 40%. Now, you hope this is not a case of he's 29 years old and he's just not going to run quite as much. I don't think that's the case at all. He still had a very good passing touchdown rate. The passing efficiency, 8.4 yards per attempt. I don't think Lamar Jackson lost any skill last year. It's more of a bet on hopefully he doesn't leave a couple of games early next year. Hopefully he doesn't get an injury that causes him to run less. But I think that there's probably more upside with a head coaching change, and hoping that maybe we get just a few more Lamar Jackson pass attempts. Maybe we get a little faster paced offense than what the Ravens have been the last couple of years.
This to Heath's point, we kind of go through these scenarios where we have gone through these scenarios with him a couple of times, and then it depresses his draft value, and you get such an incredible player at a lesser price. Now, he's not going to fall very far. I think, if I recall, from the 6 of us who did the rankings, he was still top 5 in all of our lists. But we were discussing him as the number 1 quarterback last year, and he was going in round 2. So if you get this guy in round 3 or maybe round 4, depending on how quarterbacks go in your league, he may not be the same player because he's clearly going to slow down at some point and maybe run less. And maybe that's what we saw last year. But as Adam and I talked about this, Heath, on the FFT Express on Monday, like, what's the number of rushing yards where he's still in contention to be the best quarterback? Like, is it 600 yards? Is it 700 yards? I don't know if he's going to have a 1,000-yard rushing season again. That's a lot to ask. But if he's north of 500, because he's never going to be a high rushing touchdown guy unless just things change. He's not going to be a tush push guy. He's not going to be, a guy that when they get inside the 5 is going to steal a lot of rushing touchdowns again, unless just the new coordinator changes some things or his game changes. But I think you can't necessarily rely on him strictly as a passer to be a top 3 fantasy quarterback. You need to have that rushing production to get him there. And at what point does it become, he's just not running enough? To me, 600 feels like a good number, 600 rushing yards.
In his first 3 games, like I said, he scored 33 points or more in all of them, and he was on pace for 669 rushing yards. I think the question, he's obviously, this was the most obvious guy of just being affected by an injury. He kept getting hurt in practice. He kept getting hurt. He comes back from his first injury and he scores over 30 points against the Dolphins with a 4-touchdown game, 33.6 points there. And then injury after injury, just playing hurt, not running, and really finished poorly. So the question is, does he bounce back to his 2024 form, or is the number 1 quarterback in fantasy, had a 50% touchdown rate in the red zone, which was the highest since at least 2000? Or does Lamar Jackson bounce back to, top, like QB4-ish, 24-ish, 5 points per game instead of closer to 30?
We don't ever expect anyone to do, going into a season, whether it's Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson or anybody else, we don't ever expect for anyone to do what Lamar Jackson did in his best 2 seasons. So I think probably
he was doing it again,
Well, I mean, he could,
yeah,
but that's an outlier performance, and he was doing it again. I think you could go through those 3 names I just said and find 4-week samples where they do that all the time. I think Mahomes had
it was right in a row, like right out of the gate. He just picked up right where he left off.
That doesn't make it any more likely for him to keep doing it than if he did it weeks 5 through 8. Like, it's just that's so. Is he going to do that for a full season? I doubt it.
Right? No, he's not going to.
But I think at the very least we get a bounce back to 25 points per game.
All right, football fans, you can bounce back if you're first to score a touchdown bet doesn't go right. So picture this: you bet on your favorite player to score the first touchdown of the game, but his teammate scores instead. Well, if this happens, BetMGM wants to give you another chance at the end zone. With BetMGM's second chance promotion, you'll get your stake back if your first touchdown scorer scores second instead. That's right. Bet on any pro football player to score the first touchdown of the game. And if you're right, you win. And if your player scores second, you get your stake back in cash. With BetMGM's second chance offer, you have a chance to keep the fun going after the first player crosses the goal line. Try a first touchdown scorer with confidence, Try a first touchdown scorer wager with confidence today. BetMGM, make it legendary. We got a couple wide receivers on Heath's list here: Justin Jefferson and Terry McLaurin. All right, what do you have to say about these fellows?
Well, I think that McLaurin is kind of like the Lamar thing in that he just and Jamie talked about this going into the season, and he was right about it. The holdout and not being necessarily in good enough shape to play football or ready for the season. And he got hurt after week 3, and then he dealt with backup quarterback play for most of the time that he was back. But still, if you look at what he did from even week 3 on, when he only played 60% of the snaps, he was still on pace for almost 1,100 yards and 66 catches and had 6 touchdowns. So there's a bounce back there no matter what. But if I expect Jayden Daniels to bounce back as well, I almost put both of them on the list, but I didn't want to put 2 players from the same team. I think that helps McLaurin. I think going into the season with his contract situation settled helps McLaurin. And I would just expect he's probably not going to bounce back. Listen, we went into last year, even before we had the holdout concerns, saying there's touchdown regression coming. So I wouldn't expect him to bounce back to 13 touchdowns. But the 5 prior seasons, he'd been between 77 catches and 87 catches, and between 1,000 yards and 1,200 yards. And I think that's probably what you're getting from McLaurin. And he probably scores 8 touchdowns, and he's probably a number 2 wide receiver.
Justin Jefferson, do you think he should be a first-round pick in 2026?
Second-round pick. But last year he was worth, what, a 5th-round pick?
He was wide 30 per game.
Yeah, that's maybe 6th. And I felt like when watching his struggles with JJ McCarthy, sometimes it was just McCarthy not playing well. Sometimes it was just the connection wasn't right between those two. And whether McCarthy's the starting quarterback week 1 or not, if he is, I think that he and Jefferson will have some things figured out. He's not getting back to 1,800 yards, kind of like what we said with Lamar. But I do think he's probably getting back to being a top 12 wide receiver.
I think the hope would be and it may not be McCarthy, you look at his numbers with Carson Wentz, and that's the production I think you should be expecting from consistent Jefferson. I don't want to say elite Jefferson, because elite Jefferson I still think can get back to 1,800 yards with the right quarterback. But is that guy going to be in Minnesota? So whether it's McCarthy and a proven guy in Aaron Rodgers, I don't think Jacoby Brissett gets free of Arizona, but that type of guy, a veteran, proven option that can be consistent in case McCarthy gets hurt, magically gets hurt / benched, gets benched outright, one of those scenarios. Because what he did with Carson Wentz, I forget the number of games, but he was averaging over 16 PPR points per game with Wentz, which I think is clearly 2nd-round value and a good enough fantasy wide receiver that could even get better, with the right type of production. So they had offensive line issues throughout the course of the season last year. Jordan Addison was in out of the lineup last year. TJ Hawkinson wasn't necessarily, I think, the type of player that we were hoping he was going to be, still a year removed from the ACL tear. Like, there's just a lot of moving parts with Minnesota. And I still believe in Kevin O'Connell. I still believe in Justin Jefferson. I think everybody does. It's just a matter of, can you believe in the quarterback wide receiver pairing, and when you're going to be willing to take that risk?
Yeah. Well, here with with Carson Wentz, you said he averaged over 16 points per game, but he did not even score a touchdown in those 5 games with Carson Wentz.
Yeah, that's true.
And, he was on pace for 116 catches, 1,622 yards, 0 touchdowns on 170 targets. And, the targets, he only
Part
had
of that was without Addison, though, right? If I'm not mistaken.
It was weeks 3 through 8. So I want to
Yeah,
say,
so Addison was out through week 4, right?
Let's see. Jordan Addison, he missed only one of those games. And the other one other thing about those games with Carson Wentz is he played Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Philadelphia, and the Chargers. 4 of those 5 teams were top 8 against wide receivers. So actually like a tough stretch for Justin Jefferson, and he was still on pace for he averaged over 100 yards per. Oh no, not quite. Sorry, like 90 yards per game or something like that. But
who knew that was the sell high window?
Yeah, who knew, right? But I think just for if you think he's just going to go back to being potentially the number 1 wide receiver, he certainly could. He's talented enough, but we're just seeing a trend. I just want to point out we're seeing a trend with Minnesota the last 2 years. They've had a really, really good defense, and they don't throw the ball as much as they used to, especially with McCarthy. Wentz was like 33 pass attempts per game.
I mean, if he gets just back to 2024 when they didn't throw quite as much, it's 100 catches for 1,500 yards and 10 touchdowns. I think we'd all be pretty good with that.
Oh, we'd be great with it. But he's not at this point. Jefferson's not going to be debated with Jamar Chase and CeeDee Lamb and all that.
No.
But yeah.
Well, unless there's a huge change at quarterback.
Yeah, that's true. Right. They hit a home run there. Okay. So you had Terry McLaurin.
Maybe keep Sam Darnold. Get him back.
What's that?
Maybe get Sam Darnold back.
Yeah. You had Terry McLaurin and Jamie had Jayden Daniels. We'll get to Jamie's list in a moment here. I didn't have so much a list as I had 3 offenses that I'm hopeful for bounce backs. I have questions about all of them. I'll rank them in the order of most confident of them bouncing back. And all of them are represented in the list of Jamie's breakouts. But the 3 offenses that I had here were the Chargers. That's in order of most confidence I have them bouncing back. Chargers. I'm going to say Eagles, then Bucks. And Jamie's got Herbert on here. He's got A.J. Brown on here. He's got McConkey on here. He's got Bucky Irving on here. So these are offenses that for the Chargers, it's just, we always talk about Joel. They were really, really good when he was healthy. But also, they got McDaniel now. And Rashawn Slater, their other tackle, he missed the entire season too. So there's so many reasons to like the Chargers offense right now. The Eagles offense, I mean, this is their points per game in their last 4 seasons since they acquired A.J. Brown. 2nd, 7th, 6th, 21st. If they trade A.J. Brown, that's a problem. If they keep him, I still think they have problems there. They have is Lane Johnson going to play? They've been so much better when he's been in the lineup. I don't know I think the most obvious bounce back candidate for them personally, Jamie, is Barkley. You put A.J. Brown on there. I mean, you didn't have Barkley on there, but that doesn't mean you don't consider him one. But his metrics were just too bad, in my opinion. I don't think he could do this poorly again. He was RB 16 per game, Saquon Barkley, 17 per game. But yeah, the Eagles, I do have some concerns about them, but it seems like they should bounce back. And then the Bucks. This is another team who's it was never really healthy. Everyone at the same time. You took maybe the last 4 games of the year when Evans came back, but Bucky Irving was always battling something. Tristan Wirfs was in and out of the lineup. So those are the 3 offenses I had: Chargers, Eagles, Bucks. You have all of them represented. How would you rank them in terms of who's gonna points per game? Chargers, Eagles, Bucks next year. How would you rank them?
Chargers, Bucks, incomplete right now because we don't know the offense coordinator for Philadelphia. And that could change everything. And it's funny, you see a lot of the Eagles beat writers, and they do such a great job. There's a lot of them. Obviously, it's a big market. Nobody wants this job. They can't find anybody to take this offense coordinator job. Now, maybe they're holding out for somebody I don't think Kubiak makes a lateral move, for example, but, maybe there's somebody on Seahawks staff or the Patriots staff that they're waiting for. Maybe they're waiting, getting pushed back by somebody who's hoping to get an offensive coordinator job someplace else, or even a head coaching job someplace else. I can't pronounce his name, but the passing game coordinator for the Rams, Nate, whatever his last name is. There's a number of different ways this could end up. but clearly there's some disconnect there. I think just in the case of the Chargers, you've added a very bright offensive mind. Forget about what Mike McDaniel did as a head coach. In his tenure in Miami, he had a season with Tua Tagovailoa as the leading passer in the NFL. And now he has a much better passer. He had a season where his running back led the NFL in rushing touchdowns. And now he has a first-round pick. That was a 30-year-old Raheem Mostert. We know what he did with Devon Achane. We know what he did with Tyreek Hill. We know what he's done with Jalen Waddle. We know what he's done with Jonnu Smith. Like, there's just been different parts of this offense that is now getting what could be, just a significant talent upgrade in a lot of different spots. And so there's just a lot to like about this. And, you mentioned Joe Alt and just even the numbers last year when Justin Herbert had Joe Alt, and that was without Rashawn Slater, like the numbers were good. So Herbert to me is so much, I don't know, bounce back, re-breakout, however you want to classify this. Like he's somebody that I think you should be excited to draft. Ladd McConkey's value is on the rise. We'll see. I'd be surprised they bring back Keenan Allen, but who knows? One more year of Quentin Johnston. I think Aronde Gadsden's going to get a boost. Obviously, Amari Hampton's going to be fun to draft because of what this offense does with its running backs. We'll see what, they do to enhance it, who else they bring in. But still, like, there's just a lot to love about the Chargers. And I think we would be somewhat excited about the Chargers, maybe everybody except Heath, in just knowing that the offensive line being healthy. And now you add McDaniel to it. Like, to me, it's got, rocket ships attached to it.
Yeah, I guess I wonder how much better we think McDaniel is as an offensive coordinator than Greg Roman. Like, the Chargers were 20th in points per game this year. That was his worst mark since he was on the 49ers in 2014. Like, it's
they were great when they were healthy.
What?
They were great when they were healthy. I don't know that he did a bad job.
Right. But it will be interesting to see these guys in a new system and to see which guys are the guys he likes to use. I think everybody's going to be extremely excited about Amari Hampton and Ladd McConkey are the two guys, and maybe a really good opportunity for value on Quentin Johnston.
Don't forget they drafted Trey Harris in the second round this past year. So I want to talk more about McConkey. Let's do that. We'll take a break here. We'll talk more about McConkey, get into Jayden Daniels, 3 running backs on Jamie's list. Sam LaPorta is another guy that shows up here on Jamie's bounce back list. We'll be right back after this on Fantasy Football Today.
Critics agree Landman is a hit.
We roll the dice one last time.
Men die. Oil companies don't.
So McConkey 2024 as a rookie, was just phenomenal, but kind of did it in this a little bit too good to be true. Super efficient. Wasn't really getting a ton of targets because they were kind of run heavy. And then in 2025, his target per route run rate falls to 18.9%. And that was very surprising. So yes, Keenan Allen, I think, was a big reason for that, but also the emergence of Quentin Johnston, the emergence of Aronde Gadsden didn't help. Now you've got Trey Harris. Let's say Allen's gone and Trey Harris, gets more targets. I probably won't get as many as Keenan Allen got, but I don't know. Do you look at this as sort of a crowded receiving core, Jamie, and maybe Ladd McConkey, who's just more or less a slot guy? Let me check that slot. 61% slot rate. It's on the high side, but we've seen wide receivers have great seasons with that kind of slot rate. I don't know. You get what I'm saying here? Like the situation has changed. They did not have a tight end a year ago that we cared about. They did not have Quentin Johnston as anything significant. The situation has changed a little bit for McConkey. And they could have one of the best defenses in football. So, you have him on the bounce back list, but what are your expectations?
I don't think he plays as poorly as he did last year. I don't think he plays as great as he did his rookie season. But I think there's certainly a lot more to offer and a lot more that he will give us with now a better play caller from what I would consider a passing downs perspective. So to Heath's point, I don't think Greg Roman was the reason why the Chargers completely fell apart last year. I think that had a lot to do with health. But I also think, when you don't have protection for your quarterback, the lack of opportunities to throw the ball down the field are certainly not going to be there. So if you tell me that both tackles have the chance to play the majority of the season, Keenan Allen's gone. Mike McDaniel's now calling plays. Justin Herbert gets better, gets back maybe to the type of thrower that we saw earlier in his career, or at least in parts last year when he had protection. I don't know. This is a guy I think that's an easy player to target when we talk about the receiving options for fantasy managers and how it kind of falls off. Like, this is the type of guy I would like to get. So if you go running back round 1, depending, early round 1, depending what you do at the swing, I still think early round 3 is a place to start to consider McConkey. I don't know if that's where his ADP will settle, but that's where I would start to consider him. Once you get past the top 10 or 12 wide receivers, he's in that mix for me.
I think it's going to be really interesting to see what the pass run split for the Chargers is this year. Just because I think we know what Harbaugh prefers. Generally, there's probably a reason he chose Roman the first time. And 3 of the 5 years that McDaniel has been, he probably wasn't calling plays in San Francisco. So if you want to rule that one out, but he was an OC for 1 year and a head coach for 4 years. 3 of those years, they ranked better in rush attempts per game than they did in pass attempts per game, including last year. And when he was with Shanahan, it was like they were top 5 in rush attempts and towards the bottom in league pass attempts, because that's what Shanahan prefers to do. So I think for McConkey, that matters probably more than it does for anybody else. You can have a team that's really good running the ball, and if you throw touchdown passes, the quarterback can still be very good. Or if the pass offense is as efficient as it is in San Francisco, the quarterback can still be really good. And that might happen. But McConkey seems like one of those guys who's probably going to need a high volume of receptions to be a real difference maker as a wide receiver.
Garrett Wilson or Lad McConkey?
Who's the quarterback for the Jets?
Yeah. Who's the offensive coordinator for the Jets?
Yeah. I
think Garrett Wilson's better than Lad McConkey.
I just asked the chat because I think this is where you go, okay, well, Lad McConkey, I think a lot of people are going to expect the Chargers to have a very good offense, but they're going to expect more targets for Garrett Wilson. So it's going to be, so far, 4 votes in the chat, and all of them are for Garrett Wilson. So there's your sample size. All right. Let me ask you, Jamie, about
what happens when we get to 6.
What'd you say?
6 votes. That might sway it.
6 votes. Yeah. Well, I don't know if you're in the chat and you see the question, go ahead and respond. I'm just curious to see take people's temperatures there. Let's talk about Jayden Daniels, Jamie, and you have him as a bounce back. And he got off to a decent start, not a great start, but scored about 22 fantasy points in each of his first 2 games in 6-point per passing touchdown leagues, and then got hurt. And then he came back, 19 points, 27 points, 19 or about 20 points, and then he just kept getting hurt. So he's a bounce back for you, Jayden Daniels.
I mean, we saw what he did as a rookie, and we were so excited, top 3 quarterback for 2025 based on ADP. It's hard to not get excited about that player, especially, again, at a discounted price. So when you look at the rank lists, again, for the 6 of us, for the most part, he's either 5th at best or in some cases 7 through 8. So I think anytime you get the opportunity to draft a player with his upside, he could be a 1,000, 3,000 type of guy, 1,000-yard rusher, 3,000-yard passer. He was not that far off as a rookie. So 700 plus rushing yards, 800 plus rushing yards. Heath talked about it. I think it's hard to, not think the same way that Terry McLaurin's going to have a better season just because he's going to be on the field. We'll see what they do again with the rest of this receiving core. But I think just looking at what Daniels did as a rookie, like, these are the type of players that win you fantasy leagues. Guys coming back from injury that are still young and have the potential to be awesome. He fits that bill.
Is there any reason not to like him?
You think he's injury prone and, doesn't have the ability to take a step forward? Somebody just suggested in the chat, CJ Stroud, clearly that could be the unfortunate path that he follows. Great rookie season, then never gets back to that level of production. It's possible. They've made changes to the offensive staff already. You're talking about an older Terry McLaurin, an older Deebo Samuel. It's not like he has an infusion of youth right now. We'll see what they do the rest of this offseason.
Deebo's a free agent, right?
Yeah.
Who?
Deebo?
I'm not sure, but maybe.
Yeah, Heath is.
I thought so.
He's a free agent.
That's what I thought.
So again, where do they go to, build out this receiving core? a lot of still moving parts. But
yeah,
again,
their personnel sucks. I mean, right now it's their personnel stinks. It sucks. I'm going to stick with that. I think
right. But he's not the type of quarterback similar to Lamar Jackson that needs great personnel to still be a great fantasy option. It would definitely make him better. He'd be more excited about it. But
sure.
the things that he does on his own.
Yeah. All right. 3 running backs
Zach
on
Ertz is probably done. So there's a lot of, new openings to fill.
3 running backs on Jamie's bounce back list: Bucky Irving, Ken Walker, and Breece Hall. Bucky Irving, Ken Walker, and free agent Breece Hall.
I mean, Walker's obvious. We don't need to spend much time on that one. If, he comes back to Seattle, Zach Charbonnet is not ready for the start of the season. I think I've said it a few times now. I'd be interested in him in round 2, depending on what the prognosis is on Charbonnet with his rehab and, following surgery, which I don't even know if he's had yet. In the case of, and if he goes to another team, he could easily be still a great fantasy option. We'll have some frustration about how he gets it done, but you've seen now 2 games in 2025, one in the playoffs, one in the regular season, week 3. Without Zach Charbonnet, he was 18 PPR points or more in both of those. And if you factor in the 49ers game in the divisional round when he left, it was 31 plus points, in that game. So, huge opportunity for him. Breece Hall is still, I think, a tricky one because, again, does he stay with the Jets? What do the Jets look like? I had my concerns about Breece Hall last year, and sometimes it looked like I was right. Sometimes it looked like I was, wrong because he still has, still had some great games. And, I think, Heath, you mentioned this the other day, I forget what it was, but his yards per carry wasn't bad, over the course of the season. He's just got so much talent and upside. Like, he's an easy guy to, fall back in love with if everything is right. Again, especially if he leaves or is allowed to leave the Jets, because I think they'll franchise tag him. But if he goes someplace else and gets, with a great offense, like, he could be top 5 caliber running back. Bucky Irving is, we'll see. They revamped their entire offensive staff. Zach Robinson clearly still used 2 running backs last year. They have what I would guess is going to be 2. I'm going to guess Rachaad White leaves. He's a free agent. He's already talked about wanting to reunite with Jayden Daniels, so maybe he goes to Washington and upgrades their crappy personnel. But if it's Bucky and just one other guy, and maybe we get to see, especially if it's Sean Tucker, then we get to see Bucky Irving in the passing game, because I don't think that's Sean Tucker's role. We saw what he was as a rookie. We saw at times last year, certainly before he got hurt, that he could still be an elite fantasy option. So I think in the case of at least 2 of these guys, because Walker will definitely have a high ADP if he's the guy in Seattle with Charbonnet not coming back. If it's still Breece Hall with the Jets with a shady quarterback situation, not exactly a guy that we love, and Bucky Irving's still in a committee, you may get these guys at just great prices, and the talent is still there for both those guys to be special.
Heath, any thoughts on Bucky Irving, Breece Hall? You said Breece Hall. You talked about him. Was it last episode? I don't know, but you think?
Yeah, I think Hall's probably the most dependent on where he is, and considering the offensive environment, he still had a very good year last year, like 1,400 yards from scrimmage. He just scored 5 touchdowns. You would hope he scores more touchdowns, but the Jets are going to have to make some improvements if they franchise tag him, and he's stuck there. I think Walker, another guy who finally played 17 games last year. I wonder, and I've seen a lot of people say on social media, if Zach Charbonnet is not there and they just make Ken Walker a feature back, there's no way he makes it 17 games. And so that's kind of the sentiment. And so what we'll find out this offseason is, do the Seahawks think the same thing? Because I can't imagine anybody's expecting Charbonnet to help the team the first month of the season at least. So whether they bring him back and whether he's the only running back they give a contract to this offseason will make a big difference there. Bucky's probably the one I'm most scared about. And I wonder, the thing that would save him, like if you just think about what the Falcons did last year, if Bucky's in that Bijan role and he's seeing that type of target volume, then his rushing efficiency isn't really going to matter that much. Now, he may not score that many touchdowns, because one of the complaints we had throughout the time that Tyler Allgeier's been in Atlanta is that the short yardage carries. And last year, the problem for Bucky was they didn't want to give him the ball inside the 5-yard line, especially in the second half. So it might be hard for him to score a lot of touchdowns, but if he catches 60 passes, that doesn't really matter. I'd really hate it if Tyler Allgeier follows Robinson to Tampa.
Yeah, that would not be good. All right, and then we'll finish up.
Unless they move on from both Rachaad White and Sean Tucker, then I think it'd be okay.
Well, I think
Yeah.
there's a possibility that Robinson goes through camp and watches Algier and Bucky run the football and just decides, you know what, Bucky should be our second back, still catching a bunch of passes, but Algier's just a better rusher than he is.
Yeah.
Or the goal line back, like you said. You know,
Well, I think he will be. I don't think, but I mean, maybe not, but I don't expect Bucky to be the goal line back.
I think he was in 2024. I mean, I think he had every role, right? And Sean Tucker was there.
Down the stretch.
Yeah, once he
for
became
6 weeks. Yeah.
I bet you he was at the beginning of the year also in 2025. I don't think he was coming off the field. Let me see. I can try to look that up. All right, while I look that up, a couple things. Jamie, it's pronounced Shieldhouse. I knew that. I don't know why I didn't say it.
Shieldhouse.
Rams passing game coordinator. And your wide receivers are CeeDee Lamb, AJ Brown, and Lad McConkey. We talked about McConkey. So CeeDee Lamb and AJ Brown are bounce backs.
Lamb again is somewhat obvious. You know, the lack of touchdowns was really the most alarming thing. And clearly, if George Pickens leaves the Cowboys, CeeDee Lamb, you can argue, is the number one receiver in fantasy. He was that good in 2023. And so there's just a lot to love about what Lamb can do. But clearly, when you see 14 PPR points per game, that's not the type of player I think CeeDee Lamb is. So did not have the greatest 2025 season, was overshadowed by Pickens for a lot of the year. But still, with Dak Prescott, same offense. Obviously, the connection's there. I think still CeeDee Lamb's still one of the best receivers in fantasy. You know, it's funny when you said, are we talking about Justin Jefferson with Jamar Chase and CeeDee Lamb? You know, you don't mention Puka Nacua and JSN. That just shows you, I think, the respect that a lot of people have for CeeDee Lamb, that he's still in that caliber of conversation, knowing that he wasn't as productive as a couple of those other guys. So everybody, for the most part, has CeeDee Lamb as a top 5 wide receiver. I think just writing the stock watch from the playoffs and looking at our top 24s, Dan has, and I don't know if he'll stick with this. This was done week 18. Dan has CeeDee Lamb ahead of JSN. You know, so that's, I think, how much he's still hoping that CeeDee Lamb could be CeeDee Lamb again. So he's fairly obvious as somebody who can rebound at a high level. I still think the same thing for AJ Brown. You know, you look at the stretch of games that AJ Brown had, and I don't have it in front of me, I'm sorry, but it was like week 11 through 16, 17 in that range. I think it was maybe 15. He was averaging over 19 PPR points per game. Like, he was still dominant. He just didn't do it in the early part of the year when everything was sort of in flux and complaining and all these things. You know, it's just a matter of, will he still stay in Philly? Will they get the right coordinator in place? If he leaves Philly, does he go to a team that has an elite quarterback? You know, some people, when we were talking about, I don't know who it was in the chat, somebody posted AJ Brown back to Tennessee. You know, that's not going to make him, I think, an elite fantasy option. It'll still make him a good fantasy option, but I don't think you want to see him with Cam Ward. No disrespect there, but he's just not at that level of quarterback yet. And I could be wrong, but if he goes to Buffalo, if he goes to New England, if he goes to a team that has an established quarterback and passing game and all those things, then I think you feel really good about AJ Brown. But I think you take the sample size of when he was at his best. He can still get there. He's still young enough. I still have a lot of faith in AJ Brown. And we already talked about McConkey. So I think all three of these receivers, to me, are top 3 round picks.
AJ Brown he averaged 19.8 points per game from weeks 12 through 17.
Sorry, that was a stretch.
Yeah, that's fine. And that was good enough to be wide receiver 4 overall. Not sure about per game, probably right up there. Let's see. Those games were at Dallas.
If you take everybody's best stretch of games.
At Dallas, Chicago, great matchups there. He took advantage of them. Then he had 100 yards at the Chargers. Only had 2 targets, caught a touchdown against the Raiders. They destroyed the Raiders in that game, barely through. Then he was at Washington, great matchups. He had very favorable matchups down the stretch. Then he kind of struggled at Buffalo, which I think was a bad weather game.
I did think Dan made a good point. Mark the tape. About like the way the Eagles are talking about AJ Brown and not trading him. And it may not be lip service, because the way they structure salaries, it is an enormous hit to them if they trade AJ Brown, because they have so much money that they've already guaranteed. It'd be great for the new team, but it's going, if they trade him according to over the cap, if they trade him before June 1st, they have $43 million in dead money.
Yeah.
I think the one thing about this is, like, for most people outside looking in, he's unhappy. He's, the live stream where he said, whatever about the offense, seemingly wanted to be out of there. Then you ask him and you ask everybody there, and there's no issues.
Right.
And so there's always the gray area of what's the truth. Does he really want out? Does the team want to get rid of him? Do they want to move on? Like, it doesn't seem like Sirianni is upset with AJ Brown ever. It never seems like Jalen Hurts outwardly is upset with AJ Brown.
Remember the playoff game?
Well, but Andy Reid and Travis Kelce do that twice a year.
Yeah, and look, there's going to be moments.
I think there's
we all get along. We've had moments where we yell at each other too.
A while. I thought about that somewhat recently. We haven't really yelled at each other.
I'll work on that. I'll see if I can get you fired up.
You can.
I think there's a very decent, good chance.
I hate you as a commissioner.
That the big problem that AJ Brown had in Philadelphia is no longer there. Like the offensive coordinator may have just kind of resolved it. And going back to what you said about Dan and CeeDee Lamb over JSN, do we all agree with that? If Kubiak and George Pickens are both on different teams?
Yeah, I would take Lamb over JSN.
Yeah, it's a fair argument, and as I wrote in the story, I think you might be the only one right now, Heath, that has JSN over Chase. And again, this is going back to week 18, so you may have changed it already. But now you see JSN and what he just did, right? He destroyed the Rams, had an awesome game, 10 catches, 145 yards, and a touchdown, whatever it was. Like the production over the course of the season, number 2 receiver, was fantastic. 21 point, whatever it was, points per game. Like, CeeDee Lamb was over 23. So he can do that. Chase in the 8 games that Joe Burrow started last year was 20.1 PPR points per game. Like, these guys are so good. It's like, if you really want a wide receiver, because I'm going to guess the 2 running backs get mixed in there, unless maybe a third creeps up. But the 2 running backs of Bijan and Gibbs, like, if you want one of the top 4, and if you want to say Lamb right now is 4, like, you just want to pick 6 in the first round.
Will you shut up already, Heath? Just had
that was bad effort. Like, when it happens, you lose control of the things you say.
The shoulders, we know the shoulders.
But a lot of it though is like, usually, like, we're pranking each other in some cases too, because like the idiot moron thing was, we were messing with you.
That was when I dropped Carson Wentz, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Right. When I told you, I'm like, drop Carson Wentz, we'll just add him back.
I remember. Okay, it was you dropped Carson Wentz from the team that we shared without asking me for some scrub receiver on the Jets. And
that was back when you thought Carson Wentz was an elite quarterback.
Well, he was an elite quarterback. It wasn't I thought it. He was great. Yeah, those are big.
Gamer Eric says the last big blow up we had was you going off on me for not dropping the players.
I don't know.
You dropped Evan Neal, who's now going to be the starting running back for the Saints, and I hate you.
CeeDee Lamb, by the way, is on pace for 156 targets from week 7 through 17. And George Pickens was on pace for 146 targets from week 7 through 17. Pickens, though, on pace. Oh, they both were on pace for 5 touchdowns. Pickens, a few more catches. All right. And then tight end. Sam LaPorta was a tight end you have on here. He's got the back injury, hopefully ready for training camp. You have him as a bounce back. And it'd be kind of interesting to sort of, there wasn't a lot of overlap of Sam LaPorta being healthy and Jamison Williams being good. I think maybe 1 or 2 games. And then JMO kind of took off after LaPorta. Week 10 was his last game. So anyway, you have him as a bounce back. He's frustrating because he's so up and down. Like, a lot of bad games on this game log here for LaPorta. But anywho, discuss.
Well, you have a coach now as the offense coordinator, assuming he's going to be the play caller, because Dan Campbell could be the play caller. But Rob Petzing's history is from Cleveland to Arizona, You saw what that combo was.
Drew Petzing.
Drew Petzing. Why do I always call him Rob? Drew Petzing. I don't know why. I think I must have Rob Pelinka's name in my head for some reason, the general manager of the Lakers. Anyway, Drew Petzing from Cleveland was part of that staff when we were fascinated by their tight end production, goes to Arizona, gets arguably maybe the best tight end in football right now, in Trey McBride, certainly in the conversation to be that guy. And the production is elite. And so there's a lot of mouths to feed in Detroit still. That's not going to change. But Jared Goff has shown the ability to use Sam LaPorta certainly as a red zone threat. LaPorta's rookie season was fantastic. He hasn't gotten back to that level. I think we discussed this either Monday or last week. Like, there's a pretty clear cut, probably 6 tight ends. I think that a lot of people are going to draft in some order. Likely if he goes somewhere, may change that. Kyle Pitts, if he goes somewhere else, may change that. But the 2 top tier guys of McBride and Bowers, the 4 young tight ends of Loveland, Fannin, Warren. Am I forgetting somebody? Maybe it's 3. Maybe it's just those 5 guys. I'm sorry, Tucker Kraft being the 6th. Tucker Kraft being the 6th guy. LaPorta could and maybe should be right after him, just knowing what he's capable of doing and now getting an offensive mind like Steve Petzik, who can, feature him to a high level.
Detroit, I just want to look at one thing here. Detroit was 12th in points per game in weeks 1 through 7. And Jared Goff averaged 29 pass attempts per game. In their last 10 games, Goff averaged 37.5 pass attempts per game. And that was weeks 9 through 18. So I'll tell you where they ranked, because this is a second straight year. This has happened 2 straight years where their defense fell apart. They had a lot of injuries. So they go from 12th in points per game in the first half of the season, basically first 7 games, to 25th. And it's just something for everyone to keep in mind, is that they actually could have a good defense if they could just stay healthy. They have a lot of talent on their defense. Last, 2 years ago, or 2024, it was Hutchinson getting hurt and all of their secondary getting hurt. This year, it was basically all of their secondary again. Only McNeil missed time. Some linebackers missed time. It was crazy. So they are not going to throw as much as we hope if they're healthy on defense.
But LaPorta basically played when the defense was good, right?
Yeah, and JMO was invisible.
And he last year, he averaged a career high in yards per game, catch rate, yards per catch, yards per target, and success rate. LaPorta did.
Mm-hmm.
He just scored 3 touchdowns in 9 games. But I may have a hard time when I actually get the projections done keeping LaPorta out of the top 5. I'm very optimistic about him.
But in this stretch, he was on pace for 93 targets.
But Rob Petzing.
Chris Petzing.
Yeah. All right. Well, there you go. Sam LaPorta, bounce back candidate. And that's it for today's show, folks.
You and Dan fight a lot.
Not real fights, though. There was only one thing, Dan, that I actually got mad at.
You've never screamed, "I hate you" at an octave 3 levels higher than your normal voice at Dan?
Probably. Many times, I guess.
By the way, I'm continuing along with The Wire, and man, it's so fantastic. You're so wrong about The Wire.
I might be
100% right.
I'm willing to be wrong. I'm willing to admit it. I hope I'm wrong. I'd like to start watching it.
Where are you on The Sopranos?
I'm not. I'm done with The Sopranos.
But I remember. I realized why you don't like it.
Why?
Because the picture that is shown and the character that's in the first season that you just have never really liked.
I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't really remember. I just remember being bored.
It's on the Twitter list.
No, I never said that about Michael Jordan, right? Michael B. Jordan.
Keith, what do you make of I forget who it was from the Chiefs saying that they expect Kelsey back?
I'm not really surprised. I'm not really surprised by that. I don't think he wants to go out like that. It's going to be really interesting if they bring in another wide receiver trying to figure this out. But if not, you just kind of expect that it's going to be a little bit better than it's been with Nagy there.
Gamer Eric says, I've been watching Mayor of Kingstown about halfway into season 1. Great stuff.
Fantastic show.
I just don't understand why the reviews are not good for Mayor of Kingstown. It's not like a critically acclaimed show.
I'm not sure I've ever looked at the critics' reviews of any show that I've ever watched, and I don't know why I would care.
No, I haven't either, but I just wanted to read some reviews after season 4 ended, and I guess season 4 was the most favorably reviewed season. And I don't necessarily think it was the best.
It was your least favorite season, wasn't it?
No, I wouldn't say that.
I thought you said nothing happened.
No, what?
Okay. I thought that's what you said.
I don't think I said that because I don't think that.
Okay.
Stranger Things last season was my least favorite Stranger Things season.
I thought it was fantastic.
You liked it too much, Heath.
I know.
I don't think you ever talked about this. You liked it way too much.
It's a big problem of mine.
Well, you're not critical enough. I can't take your recommendations seriously if you're not going to dislike any shows.
Well, I didn't like Game of Thrones.
Oh, then I definitely can't take you seriously. So the one show you should like.
I don't watch shows like a critic. I just like what I like to watch and watch that.
I don't watch shows like a critic either, but
it sounds like you do.
I disagree with the critics about Mayor of Kingstown. I don't know anyone who has not liked Mayor of Kingstown. My dad doesn't like Mayor of Kingstown.
Your dad doesn't like anything.
He likes a lot of shows. He watches his TV, but he doesn't like Mayor of Kingstown.
Or people.
Or yeah, like he likes some people. All right, we're out of here, folks. We'll talk to you on Friday with a mailbag. Submit your questions, fantasyfootball@cbsi.com. See you later.